Hello, Liz. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Of course. Now, definitely you join a lot of people across the world paying attention to the elections and Bolivia's democratic situation. What can you tell us about your perspective on the issue?
Well, we have been very supportive of of Evo Morales and the mass government and developments in Bolivia for several years. We have, we have been watching Canadian and U.S. imperialism trying to undermine progressive governments and, in particular, the mass government for some period of time. Canada's foreign policy has been very hostile to progressive governments in Latin America. In the past, Canada's role was much more hidden. It was Canadian governments in the past were supportive of U.S. interference in Latin America, but now Canada is playing a very public, overt role in trying to certainly to overthrow the government of Venezuela. And we have no doubt was involved in the coup d'etat against Mas and President Evo Morales. So this is a very disturbing situation, and it has the Communist Party and many other progressive organizations in Canada have been protesting the coup d'etat. The Canadian government accepted the OAS report that the last elections in 2019 were tainted, which is rubbish. Anyone who was paying any attention would know that those elections were fair, and they reflected the will of the people of Bolivia, and that the coup was, as Evo Morales himself said, really a lithium coup. It's about resources, and we know that the Mas government wanted to use Bolivia's resources to benefit the people of Bolivia. And of course, big corporations like Elon Musk's Tesla Corporation, they want to be able to access those resources. They want control over those resources. So this is about resources and about who will control the resources in the country and the future of the country. So this is not new for the U.S. U.S. imperialism for the last 100 years has been trying to overthrow governments that it cannot control, and certainly has been a leader in attacking socialist governments, whether it's in Europe or whether it's in Latin America. We saw the results of the U.S.-backed coup in Chile in 1973. Against the Allende government. They have been very busy ever since, overthrowing progressive governments, certainly over the last 10 years in Latin America, and Bolivia is the most recent one. So we have hopes that the first round results of the election that's taking place today, organized by the coup government, will actually reflect the will of the Bolivian people, which the polls show is solidly behind Mas, and that the coup plotters will be defeated in this election. That's important for the people of Bolivia. It's important for the people of Latin America and of the world.
Now, Liz, there definitely seems to be an attack against socialism across the world. Why do you think, though, that Canada, a country which before was not as forceful in its condemnation of countries that have socialist governments, why do you think Canada is now leaning more towards the United States? What does the country have to gain from sort of sucking up, many would say, to the United States government?
Well, Canada has, I guess there's two answers. The first one is that Canada is an imperialist power. And so it's always the Canadian government and Canadian corporations and multinational corporations that operate in Canada have always opposed socialism. Canada played a pretty dirty role with respect to the Soviet Union, for example. There is currently a a campaign underway in Canada that's now, 30 years old, but gaining as a result of the growing strength of reaction in the world, also in Canada, increasing its attack on the socialist states, on China, and on socialist governments like the Maoist government. So that's the first answer. This is part and parcel of imperialism. Its essence is anti-communist, to defeat communist ideas, socialist ideas. And the other answer is that, with the loss of socialism in Europe, the competition between the imperialist states and centers, the three main centers, Europe, the United States, North America, and in the Pacific, has grown sharper. And Canada has certainly through the last 100 years been ever more closely integrated with U.S. imperialism. And so our foreign policy now really reflects that level of integration. The most recent free trade deal with the United States, the U.S.-Canada-Mexico agreement, reflects that economic and political integration that's taken place. So Canada is very much, I won't say controlled by, it's partly controlled by, but we also have big corporations in Canada that are pushing this agenda of this really ugly agenda. That's why Canada's role, for example, with the Lima Group in its efforts to overthrow the government, the Maduro government in Venezuela, is very upfront. Canada's playing the lead role in the Lima Group. And the beneficiaries are imperialism in the U.S., imperialism in Canada, and on a global scale. So this is not in the past, the imperialism, it's true, in Canada has been less aggressive, but it's become increasingly aggressive and forward about it, very public about it, certainly over the last, I would say, 10, 15 years.
Why would you say some presidents in Latin America treated a bit differently than others? When you take what took place in Bolivia, and then when you compare the relationship that the United States has now with AMLO in Mexico, I mean, what are your thoughts on the way different Latin American leaders are treated by Western powers?
Well, I think it has to do with what the governments that those leaders represent are doing. I don't see that in Mexico there is a big push by the government towards socialism. In Mexico, there is some discussion about socialism, but increasingly amongst working people, there is increasing discussion about socialism, I would say, around the world. But I think there is a big difference between the Evo Morales mass government and what they were doing, the Maduro government in Venezuela, since it came to power, and what is happening in other countries, and AMLO is one of them. So it depends what your objectives are, whether you're going to pick up the fight for a sovereignty, for national self-determination, or whether you're going to find a way to make a deal with U.S. imperialism or Canadian imperialism. The other factor, of course, with respect to Evo Morales' government is that Evo Morales was the first indigenous president in Latin America. And this is something that, for the imperialist powers is intolerable. This is the racism, systemic racism, which goes hand in hand with imperialism and with capitalism.
On that note, though, Liz, indigenous peoples are definitely feeling a lot of pressure in Latin America lately, but even in Canada, we've seen racism against indigenous people permeating. Just in early October, I think it was the 1st of October, when Joyce Echequan was lying on her deathbed in a hospital in Quebec and filmed hospital staff making racist comments about her. I mean, what are your thoughts on the way indigenous people are treated by not just in countries in Latin America, but all across the world?
Well, you've said it. We have we have systemic racism exists in Canada. It's widespread. It's rampant. I could give you a more recent example, and that's the last few days in Nova Scotia, which is the easternmost part of Canada, where there's a large fishery, and indigenous people have, through treaties, so more than 200 years old, plus a 21-year-old Supreme Court decision, which recognized indigenous people's treaty rights to hunt and fish throughout the year for a modest livelihood, so to feed themselves, in short, and this is a right which they have, but it's not an acceptable right, or one which is going to be recognized by big corporations like the Clearwater Corporation and others that are operating in the area. And to the racism which has been whipped up amongst commercial fishers and others who have physically attacked indigenous fishers. So over the past several weeks, there have been efforts to sink indigenous fish boats. Live ammunition has been shot at them. Their traps have been either destroyed or seized. And this weekend, including yesterday, lobster pounds or storage facilities in Nova Scotia have been destroyed and burned to the ground. And that's systemic racism. Meanwhile, the federal police, the RCMP in Canada, were present when things were happening and have stood by, refusing to act. So there are now, in Canada, there are big demonstrations taking place in solidarity with the indigenous fishers and the indigenous communities, which are under a clear and sustained, a very dangerous attack. And demands that the federal government should act to protect the rights of indigenous fishers, and also to protect indigenous communities which are being physically attacked. Someone is going to be seriously injured very soon if the government doesn't step in. And this is systemic racism, and the government has really been exposed in the course of the last few days for its refusal to act to protect these people who are clearly under serious threat for their physical safety, and whose rights are being completely ignored. So what is the role of the Canadian government? Well, it appears that their role is to protect the big fish corporations, the big fish companies like Clearwater and others, who would be very happy to see the indigenous fishery destroyed, because it will be less competition for them in their massive profit making. And they're quite happy to turn small white fishermen and fisher people against the indigenous people, to use racism, in short, so that the alternative would be for the white fishers to join with the indigenous peoples and to fight together for a decent living against these big corporations, which are really the beneficiaries of these actions. And it's pretty clear that is who the RCMP, the federal police, are protecting, is these big fish corporations, and indigenous people are going to pay the price.
What can you tell us about the way your organization is received in Canada by Western media and by right-wing media? How difficult would you say it is to get your position across to the people? Because I've noticed that when speaking about issues in Latin America and the Caribbean, for example, you tend to see a dominant force when it comes to coverage, one particular slant and not the other. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there is a concerted effort to deny a voice to the Communist Party, that the big media do not interview members of our party or leaders of our party to get the views of the Communist Party. And this is deliberate. And it has to do, I think, with the changing political climate in the country and, for that matter, in the world. A poll was taken last year to gauge people's attitudes towards socialism. And the poll was taken in the United States and in Canada. In the United States, there was an increase in the number of people who were thought favorably, were interested in socialism. But in Canada, the poll showed that well over 50% of the people interviewed, almost 60% of Canadians thought favorably of socialism. So I think there is an effort by the media, by the big media, to suppress the Communist Party, which is Canada's party of socialism. And we are the ones who are advocating for, a socialist society, socialist governments, socialist policies in Canada. And they want to prevent people, they want to inoculate them, I guess you could say, against socialist ideas. And one of the ways to do that is to suppress those ideas and suppress those organizations which advocate them. We're not the only ones in Canada who are advocates of socialism, but we are a party which is will be, in 6 months, we will be 100 years old. So we can say we are the oldest, most consistent advocates of socialism, of working class political party, working class political power. And we're the political party to advocate that. So this is the reason why we are, you don't hear much from the Communist Party. It's not because we don't have a lot to say. We have a lot to say, and you can see it on our website. We have statements about many things that are happening internationally and in Canada. And we know that the public response to our policies and to our proposals for fundamental change in Canada have a lot of support, growing support, because of the people who are finding us, who are seeking us out, either on the internet or at protests and demonstrations. Whenever we take our material out to demonstrations, protests, when we campaign in elections, we get a very positive response. And I think that's quite worrisome to the Canadian establishment, to the ruling class in this country. You mentioned earlier that about the growth of the right wing in Canada, right wing media, but also right wing movements. And indeed, we have the election of Trump in the United States encouraged a lot of far right, white supremacist and fascist groupings to come out of the woodwork and show their faces and start to campaign in Canada. And there's been quite a reaction to these groups, where the public is saying no, we are opposed to that. And of course, after there is the Black Lives Matter movement and many other Black organizations and indigenous organizations who are very active and have many allies and supporters, including the Communist Party, who are challenging these ideas.
Thank you so much, Liz, for joining us.